Okay, so you want to own a Viking Longship fleet. You picture 20 narrow ships cutting through gray water, striped sails rising above the horizon, shields hanging from the rails, and hundreds of warriors rowing toward a wealthy monastery. The popular version is simple. Build the ships, take the silver, and return richer than you left. But a Viking fleet was never just a collection of boats. It was a floating economy held together by forests, iron, wool, food, navigation, political loyalty, and the willingness of armed men to keep following the same leader when the voyage stopped going well. The raid is remembered. The cost of reaching it usually is not. Before anyone broke open a monastery door, somebody had to cut the trees, shape every plank, forge the rivets, weave the sails, prepare the food, recruit the crews, and convince farmers to leave their land during the most important months of the year. A fleet could return with silver, livestock, captives, and prestige. It could also return with half its ships and a leader whose career ended beneath the North Sea. The first thing you need is not a ship. It is control of a forest. A longship required high-quality oak for the hull, pine for the mast, naturally curved timber for structural pieces, and more wood for oars, shields, storage, and repairs. Builders selected trees for specific parts and split trunks along the grain, producing flexible planks that could survive rough water. One major warship could consume the useful timber of dozens of mature trees. A serious fleet could turn an entire woodland into naval infrastructure. The logs then had to be moved to the building site, often by river or across frozen ground, because dragging heavy timber over wet soil was painfully slow. After that came the shipwrights. A longship looked simple because it had no cabins, engines, or towering decks. But the hull was highly engineered. Its overlapping, clinker-built planks had to bend with the sea without separating. Too rigid, and the hull cracked. Too loose, and it leaked. Every curve affected speed, stability, cargo capacity, and the number of men required at the oars. A farmer could repair a fence, but not improvise a 30-meter warship. Shipbuilders were strategic labor, and rulers who controlled them controlled access to distant coasts. Multiply the work by 10, 20, or 50 ships, and the fleet was already consuming a regional economy before it touched the water. Iron created another bottleneck, because every hull needed thousands of rivets that competed with tools and weapons for the same material. Then came the sail, possibly the most valuable object on the vessel. A large, square sail demanded an enormous quantity of wool. Sheep had to be raised, fleece cleaned, fibers spun, and thread woven into heavy cloth strong enough to survive violent winds. The panels then had to be stitched, reinforced, and treated with fats or oils. Depending on the ship, one sail could represent the wool of hundreds of sheep and thousands of hours of textile work. The people creating it were households across the region, rarely present when the treasure was divided. The fleet's speed was built from invisible domestic labor. Rope, tar, oars, anchors, and repair materials added more work. The finished ship contained years of labor that could disappear in a single storm. Then you had to crew it. A large warship might carry 60 to 80 men. 20 ships could require more than 1,000 warriors, sailors, craftsmen, and commanders. These were not salaried employees. Many were farmers, retainers, relatives, debtors, and local elites with interests of their own. Some followed because they owed service. Others expected silver, land, status, revenge, or a chance to escape poverty. Almost none followed because they wanted to make the fleet owner wealthy. This created the central labor problem of Viking warfare. The reward had to justify drowning, capture, injury, or death. If a leader chose poor targets, divided loot unfairly, or lost too many ships, recruitment became harder. Reputation, therefore, functioned like credit. A famous chieftain could gather men before the treasure existed because people trusted his ability to produce it. An unknown leader had to offer better terms, supply more equipment, or sail with fewer followers. Prestige was not decoration. It was working capital. Most warriors supplied at least part of their own equipment, but that did not make it free. Swords, mail, shields, and tools represented years of accumulated household wealth. 1,000 men leaving for the summer meant 1,000 workers removed from farms and workshops, carrying equipment that might never return. Food was the bill that arrived every day. A longship had limited storage once filled with men, oars, weapons, and gear. The crew needed water, dried fish, smoked meat, grain, flour, butter, cheese, and ale. They could fish or forage, but depending on it was dangerous. A fleet carrying more than 1,000 people could consume well over a ton of provisions each day. Every delay burned through food while producing nothing. Speed was therefore not simply a tactical advantage. It was financial survival. The shallow hull allowed longships to cross open water, enter rivers, and land directly on beaches without a port. But the same narrow design limited cargo capacity. These ships were built to arrive quickly, attack, load whatever could be carried, and leave before the logistics collapsed. Timing was controlled by agriculture as much as warfare. The men pulling the oars were also needed to plant and harvest crops. Leave too early, and spring work suffered. Return too late, and food remained in the fields. A voyage could bring back silver and still make the region poorer if it disrupted the farming calendar badly enough. Weather made the window smaller. Viking sailors read coastlines, stars, wind, waves, and birds, but skill did not remove North Atlantic storms. Fog could hide land. Wind could scatter the fleet. A damaged mast could separate one ship from every ally it had. If 20 vessels left Norway, they did not necessarily arrive as 20 vessels. A storm could divide them across different coasts and destroy the surprise on which the raid depended. The fleet's military value came from concentration. A settlement might resist one crew. It could not resist 1,000 armed men appearing at once. Weather could reduce a powerful fleet into isolated boats before the enemy lifted a weapon. Suppose the ships reach a wealthy target. Now the revenue model finally appears. The ideal loot was portable: coins, silver vessels, jewelry, weapons, fine textiles, livestock, and captives. Monasteries were attractive not because Vikings possessed a special hatred of religion, but because religious institutions often concentrated movable wealth in places with limited defenses. A silver reliquary was easier to transport than a field. A chest of coins could pay followers. The target needed enough wealth to justify the voyage and too few soldiers to stop it. Finding that balance required intelligence from merchants, scouts, previous expeditions, exiles, and local collaborators. Bad information was enormously expensive. Sail for 2 weeks and discover the treasure has already been moved, and the fleet still consumes the same food, labor, and equipment. The difference between a legendary raid and a financial disaster might be one conversation in a trading port months earlier. Taking the wealth was only half the problem. Then came the division. Hundreds of armed investors expected payment. The leader claimed a share, but captains, ship owners, local chieftains, warriors, and crews also had claims based on status and contribution. Some treasure had to reward allies at home. Some had to repair the ships. Some had to finance the next expedition. Some had to be given away publicly to turn temporary loot into long-term loyalty. A fleet could return with a fortune while leaving its organizer with surprisingly little. Keep too much, and the followers might abandon or kill you. Give away everything, and you gain fame, but lack the capital to sail again. The real skill was not stealing silver. It was converting silver into loyalty without spending so much that nothing remained. Captives could be sold through long-distance markets, but they required food, supervision, and cargo space. Their value depended on reaching the right buyer. In the wrong harbor, they were an expensive security problem rather than treasure. This is where raiding and trading began to merge. The same ships could carry furs, amber, walrus ivory, iron, timber, textiles, weapons, and enslaved people outward, then return with silver, glass, wine, silk, spices, and manufactured goods. Trade produced less spectacular returns than a successful raid, but it could be repeated without destroying every relationship along the route. The best leaders understood both models. Violence opened access, while trade converted it into recurring income. Eventually, tribute could become more profitable than attack. If a town believed the fleet would return every year, it might pay silver simply to make the ships leave. The English called one version of this Danegeld. For the fleet owner, tribute was close to perfect revenue. No siege, fewer dead warriors, less damage, and wealth transferred because the threat existed. The fleet could earn money while anchored. But this system survived only while people believed the threat was real. Lose too many battles, stop sailing, or allow rivals to challenge you, and the payments ended. The fleet was an asset and a promise of future violence that had to be renewed. The most dangerous transition came when raiding turned into conquest. Holding cities and collecting taxes required garrisons, fortifications, supplies, settlers, and year-round administration. The raider who became a king discovered that kingship was more expensive than piracy, because a state could not simply sail away from its obligations. Maintenance never stopped. Saltwater attacked iron, hulls leaked, sails tore, and ships had to be hauled ashore for repair. The fleet was not a purchase made once, but a permanent demand for timber, wool, iron, food, and labor. Much of one expedition's treasure merely financed the next. Growth made control harder. Every captain commanded armed followers and a ship that could disappear over the horizon. A successful subordinate could become a rival the following season, so control depended on gifts, family ties, hostages, obligations, and constant reward. Then came defeat. Losing a battle did not simply reduce the year's income. It destroyed ships, experienced labor, political authority, and future recruitment at the same time. Captured ships could serve the enemy. Experienced sailors took years to replace, and rivals could treat the loss as proof that the leader no longer had the luck required to rule. In a society where prestige functioned as credit, bad luck carried an interest rate. So, was owning a Viking Longship fleet profitable? It could be extraordinarily profitable, but only when an entire chain worked at once. You needed forests, iron, wool, skilled builders, surplus food, navigators, reliable intelligence, loyal captains, and targets rich enough to reward the risk. You needed to distribute treasure generously, without giving away the capital required for the next voyage. You needed to move faster than defenders, return before the harvest punished you, and survive weather that did not care how famous you were. The longship was valuable not because it floated, but because it connected distant wealth to a leader capable of organizing trade and violence across the sea. The real product was mobility. The real expense was coordination. And the true profit was not the silver lying on the beach after a raid. It was the power created when that silver returned home, paid the crews, repaired the ships, bought alliances, and convinced more men that the next horizon belonged to you. A Viking fleet was not a collection of boats. It was a high-risk investment fund made from oak, wool, iron, and human ambition, with the sea acting as both the highway and the casino. When it worked, it could turn a coastal chieftain into a king. When it failed, the sea kept the ships, the enemy kept the weapons, and history usually remembered only the man who eventually replaced you.